Hello, my name is Siobhan Pearce. I'm the Education Officer at the National Museum of Ireland Archaeology. This is a live broadcast of the online lecture, The Cherish Project, Understanding Climate Change Impacts on Our Coastal Cultural Heritage by Sandra Henry, the lead research archaeologist for the Cherish Project. This is a closed YouTube live event and it will have a duration of 40 minutes and will be posted online at a later stage. It is the last talk in the series exploring climate change and archaeology. The talks were given by members of the Climate Change Advisory Group for Built and Archaeological Heritage and are chaired by Nessa O'Connor, Assistant Keeper and Archaeologist in the Irish Antiquities Division of the National Museum of Ireland, who will now introduce today's speaker and lecturer.
Thank you very much, Siobhan, and welcome to all of you who are joining us here today for the fourth and final lecture in our series on the effects of climate change. It seems particularly appropriate that we're addressing a climate change topic during Heritage Week. We've had many stark reminders in the media and on TV in recent weeks on the effects of climate change, not so much in heritage, but very, very serious effects on people's lives in places like Germany and Greece. And we've also had other reminders, for example, through the UN report on climate change, which has also been released recently and has had some very serious forecasts associated with that report. So today we're going to look at a slightly different perspective. In the earlier lectures in the series, we've seen many sites, many archaeological sites that have been affected by climate change. And as those of you who've joined us before will know, a lot of the sites are of a very high level of importance and in very stark coastal locations. One of the things that is really very important and noticeable is that we need high quality research and high quality data to have a real understanding of the effects on our archaeological heritage. So today's lecture is about the Cherish Project, which is an EU-funded project and a collaboration between 4 different research partners in the Irish Sea Zone, 2 in Wales and 2 in Ireland. And I'll allow our speaker today to go into more detail about all of that. But it does involve very innovative research, survey, excavation, under the auspices of the Discovery Programme's technology department. There is also very up-to-the-minute data gathering in the area of 3D and survey technique. And I think you'll very much, apart from the fact that it's a serious topic, you're going to very much enjoy today's lecture for the quality of the imagery that we're going to see. So to turn to Sandra, today's speaker. Sandra has a very strong background as a research archaeologist. Her experience is mainly in the area of maritime and wetland archaeology. And as lead research archaeologist on the project, it's her responsibility to supervise the data gathering, the survey, the excavation. And I suppose the project is also strengthened by the fact that this is also the focus of Sandra's research for her PhD, where she is concentrating particularly on the effect of Promontory Forts, underwater recording and survey methodologies. And as I mentioned, there are several partners, and we will hear more about the different sites around the coast, particularly in the Irish Sea area, stretching all the way north and south of Dublin, right through Wexford, as far into the southwest as Kerry. And I'm not going to detain you any further, but I have the greatest of pleasure in introducing Sandra to speak to us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nessa. Today I'm just going to discuss some of the work that the Cherish Project is undertaking in order for us to be able to understand the climate change impacts that's occurring to our coastal cultural heritage. So as Nessa mentioned, it's an EU-funded project. It's funded through the EU Ireland Wales Programme 2020. We have 4 project partners. We have 2 here in Ireland, our Saltee Discovery Programme, and then we work with our colleagues, the Geological Survey of Ireland. Our Welsh partners include the Royal Commission on the Ancient and Historical Monuments of Wales and the Geography Department in Aberystwyth University. So Cherish itself is an acronym for Climate, Heritage and Environments of Reefs, Islands and Headlands. So what we are hoping to do, and what we have been doing with the Cherish Project, is reconstructing past environments and weather histories. We're discovering, we're assessing, we're mapping and we're monitoring heritage on land and beneath the sea. And we'll discuss some of the examples of the work we've done so far today as we travel around the coastline. So we're targeting data and knowledge gaps to raise awareness of heritage in these remote coastal locations. And we're also establishing metrically accurate baseline data and recording standards. So this infographic shows some of the different climate change impacts that our coastal cultural heritage and underwater cultural heritage is facing due to warmer global temperatures, for example. Here we can see it's denoted by the number 1. We're getting rising sea levels, and these are causing a variety of different impacts, such as inundation of our sites, and they're also leading to more damaging storm events. While if we look at number 2 here, we can see that there's a rise in sea temperatures. So this is ultimately leading to warmer seas, which causes a change to both the chemistry of seawater, such as salinity and increased acidity, and also to our marine ecosystems. So historic features such as shipwrecks, both underwater and in the intertidal zone, are becoming more vulnerable to these invasive species, which are negatively impacting these structures. We also have hotter, drier summers. So here we are seeing the drying out of cliff faces, and this is increasing the risk of destabilization and collapse, which is affecting heritage sites, for example, Promontory Forts. We're also seeing some positives for archaeology due to climate change, such as the hotter, drier summers leading to visible crop marks and parch marks. So we're identifying new archaeological sites as well. What we're also seeing is that warmer, wetter winters are causing the ground to become saturated, and this leads to a risk of flooding and landslides. Whilst we're seeing more frequent extreme weather, such as storm events, and this is leading to a number of different impacts, such as more turbulent seas, resulting in greater scarring of our submerged cultural heritage, such as shipwrecks on the seabed, and also our archaeology on the foreshore. Then we're seeing greater wave action along our coastlines, and this is resulting in greater erosion and loss at the coastal edge. Then we're seeing breaches that are occurring in coastal barriers, and this is leading to greater flooding and greater flooding hazards. Then we also see the movement and reshaping of sand dunes. So here we're finding new archaeology being exposed, and we're identifying heritage that has previously been hidden by these dune systems. Then we're also seeing structural damage is occurring to our historic buildings. So Cherish is using a multidisciplinary approach to capture airborne, seafloor and terrestrial data sets. So the project is aiming to create this seamless land-to-sea map of coastal and maritime heritage sites, and we're doing this through a variety of different methods. So we're looking at collecting metrically accurate data sets. So this allows us to measure and understand exactly how much the sites are changing over the course of the project. So there's a variety of technologies that we've incorporated into the project to be able to do this. We're looking at LiDAR data, some of which has been commissioned as part of the project. Others were accessing previously captured data sets for study areas. We're undertaking drone surveys, so this ranges from site-specific drone surveys to surveys of coastal stretches. We are also looking at satellite mapping to be able to understand change and to gather large data sets on wider areas. Then we are also collecting multi-beam Ecker standard data. So this is targeted specifically on underwater heritage sites we're looking at, such as shipwrecks, but also on much wider stretches of our sea floor to identify EU archaeology and to also understand the seafloor dynamics in those areas that we're working. Then we are undertaking aerial photography. So we have an aerial photographer as part of our project who has taken aerial survey of all the different study areas and sites that we're working in. He's only one left to complete in Ireland in County Kerry. We're also undertaking geophysical survey. So we're doing this in order to be able to identify the archaeology that isn't visible on the surface, but is also being impacted and lost due to climate change. Then we're undertaking paleo-environmental analysis of the different areas and sites that we're working in. So this allows us to understand the past environments along with building weather histories for these areas. Then alongside this, we're undertaking GNS survey so that we can map and monitor how the sites are changing over time, and so that we have precise locational data of the different areas in which we're working in. Then we're undertaking cliff recording. So we're accessing exposed archaeology that has been exposed over the course of the project or prior to that through cliff collapse. And we're undertaking this on a number of sites, in particular in County Waterford in Ireland, where our colleagues in Wales have undertaken it on a number of their excavation sites. Then we're also collecting laser scan data, and we also have undertaken excavation on a number of sites. We've undertaken 2 sites in Wales and 1 site in Ireland. And then we're also using data from underwater divers along with remotely operated vehicles to collect imagery and 3D models of different shipwrecks in the Irish Sea, and also in Wales this has been undertaken. So we create these substantial records of how our underwater heritage is changing due to the various impacts, whether they be physical, chemical, or biological. So in Ireland, Cherish is working in 5 different areas. In Dublin, the case study area includes the Fingal coastline. We work on Bull Island and also Dalkey Island. The second area is East Wexford. This is predominantly a soft sediment coastline. The third area is again in Wexford and includes various environment types such as lagoons, estuaries, and island groups. The fourth area includes the Copper Coast in Waterford and stretches from the town Moore in the east to Dungarvan in the west. The fifth area includes the western extremities of the Dingle and Evora peninsulas and the World Heritage Site of Skellig Michael. Our study areas include a variety of site types from different periods. Cherish investigates sites that range in date from the Mesolithic period right up to the 19th century. And today's talk will look at Promontory Forts in particular, which are a very common site type around the Irish coastline. And Promontory Forts, they're also found inland as well as coastally. However, they do occur in much greater abundance along our coastlines. So there is currently 573 Promontory Forts recorded in the Irish Sites and Monuments Record. Of these, 508 of them are coastally located. So promontory forts themselves are constructed where natural promontories are cut off from the surrounding hinterland. So this is achieved through the construction of ramparts, banks, and ditches. So what we often see occur is the natural where natural geological features are adapted by humans in the construction of the fort. So promontory forts are typically associated with the Iron Age, which is the period that dates from 500 BC to 500 AD. And even though they are typically associated with the Iron Age and the early Christian period, So although they are typically associated with the Iron Age and the early Christian period, archaeological and historical evidence has shown the reuse of promontory forts well into the medieval period. So it's very important for us to study this common coastal site type, which is being so heavily impacted by climate change before the archaeological record itself is lost. Their high concentration denotes their importance in Irish society, trade, and economy. Therefore, it's very important for us to learn about these different elements of society in the Iron Age and later periods. So in County Dublin itself, there's 10 different promontory forts, and we're going to take a look at the impressive site of Drumanagh. So here in Drumanagh, we can see the neck of the headland is defended by a series of earthworks. This includes 3 identifiable earthen banks, each of which has a ditch in front of them, and there's also a possible 4th series of defences. There is Martello Tower, which is located at the eastern end of Promontory Fort, and this was built around 1804. It forms part of the Napoleonic era defensive system around the Irish coastline, and these sites are actually commonly found in promontory forts due to their commanding coastal locations. Also in Drumanagh Promontory Fort, Roman activity has been identified, and this has taken the form of pottery, coins, and other various artefacts, whilst the Discovery Programme's Library Project has identified a number of structures that illustrate the extensive activity on the site. And this has ranged from V-shaped enclosures to several other possible buildings or small enclosures. Alongside this, burnt material and pits have also been identified, showing the significance of this promontory fort here in Drumanagh. So there's a high concentration of promontory forts in County Waterford. They create a sort of coastal network along this county's coastline. This network consists of 43 recorded promontory forts along the Waterford coast. 29 of these occur within our study area. A number of collapses have been recorded by the team since our initial baseline surveys of these sites back in 2017 and 18. Today, I'm going to discuss the collapse at one particular site, and that's Woodstown's promontory fort, and that's located by Anstown Beach, just to the east of the beach as you are looking south. So Woodstown Promontory Fort, which is located by Anstown Beach, and on the far side of the beach is another promontory fort that's just 800 metres as the crow flies from Woodstown. So Woodstown is cut off on the landward side from the surrounding hinterland. Here we can see it's cut off by 2 grass-covered banks and ditches. The internal area of the fort itself is quite small, but Brown's Island, which now is separated from the promontory by the sea, may at one point have been part of this fort. So for work at Woodstown Promontory Fort, due to the recent collapse that had occurred since our initial baseline survey, we used rope access in order to be able to access the exposed section faces of the banks and ditches of the promontory fort and any other features which we believe may be of interest. So here we can see an archaeologist who's probably hanging over the edge of maybe a 30-metre high cliff. And here Edward is undertaking a section face drawing of an exposed archaeological feature. We also use a number of different methods along with section face drawings. We undertook structure for motion and created photographic records of the exposed section faces, along with taking small samples to see if we'd be able to understand anything more in regard to the date and the environment of the period of usage of the Promontory Fort. We also undertook geophysical survey on Browns Island to see if we would be able to identify any features that may be associated with the usage of the Promontory Fort, for example, such as hut sites, and we use resistivity survey in order to be able to do this. The Saltee Islands are composed of granite. The islands were on the sea route between the Norse ports of Waterford and Wexford. The place name Saltee is thought to be of Norse origin, with the Saltee meaning salt island. And this potentially is derived from the phenomenon of salty sprays sweeping across the island at times of high winds and waves. The many caves around the island reveal the erosion that's occurring, but also point to their maritime nature, which is often locally associated with wreckers and smugglers. Erosion is evident on all the soft coastline along the western extent of the island and to the north and south, whilst to the east the island gives way to a hard coastline. Flint tools have been recovered from the island, and this potentially represents prehistoric activity that occurred on the island here, but our survey work so far hasn't identified any stone tools itself, but it has, however, collected flint chunks and debitage that have been recorded in abundance in areas throughout the island. And here on the slide, we can see a laser scan data of the Promontory Fort that's located at the northeast end of the island. And this is from our 2018 fieldwork survey. So the site was revisited in June of this year. We can see the Promontory Fort here consists of a bank and a ditch. There's also a possible hut site, circular in shape, that's located in the Promontory Fort. But here what we have is, in 2018, we recorded what was the exposure of archaeological layers in the cliff face. The promontory itself was obviously being negatively impacted by erosion at this point in time. The ranging rod in this image is in line with the archaeology that's exposed here on the Promontory Fort. We can see exposure of the ditch and other interesting layers, maybe to do with the occupation and habitation of the site. Whilst when we revisited the site in June 2021, we can see there's quite a difference in the vegetation. Also, the angle of the photo isn't exactly the same, but one visit was in winter and it was after Storm Emma. So the vegetation would have been particularly low at that point in time. While obviously in the summer, there's going to be just richer, denser vegetation on the sites. So, but here we can see the extreme erosion that has occurred since the initial baseline data and the large volume of material that we've now lost from the site. Unfortunately, due to health and safety concerns, we weren't able to access the exposed layers to be able to gather any samples for recording or analysis. But what we have been able to see is that this Promontory Fort is at a large threat of being completely lost due to the erosion that's occurring on the island. As you can see, this is one singular collapse event that had happened pretty recent to our visit, and it's obviously something that is going to continue to happen or there's a high probability that will continue to happen and impact this site into the future. So Ferriter's Promontory Fort and Castle is located in a commanding position on the Dingle Peninsula in County Kerry. The site overlooks the Blasket Islands to the west, Sybil Head to the north, Slea Head to the south, whilst Mount Brandon and Smerk Harbour sit to the east. Dune Point, Dún Ferriter, as Promontory Fort is known, is a long, narrow promontory which extends slightly over 500 metres from northeast to southwest. So this headland sits directly to the north of the Mesolithic Neolithic Transition Period site at Ferriter's Cove. Along the length of the promontory, narrow inlets of the sea are present in two locations, and this is due to the softer sediments being carved out here from the harder lava beds in these areas. So these inlets naturally divide the promontory into two distinct areas. These necks have been anthropogenically utilised and adapted in the construction of the promontory fort with a series of banks and ditches. So what we have is an outer and an inner set of defences. There are a number of hut sites and archaeological features visible within the boundaries of the fort, whilst a 15th or 16th century tower house, Ferriter's Castle, was constructed on the inner bank of the outer defences. The site was the subject of an excavation by the Cherish Project in May of this year. The harsh conditions and extreme climate impacts being faced by this site and many others around our coastline were visible during our 2-week spring excavation. Here we've seen two separate cliff collapses occur on this opposing headland, just to the north of the site. These collapses are exactly the same type of collapses that are affecting our promontory here, Dún Ferriter. We also, due to extreme weather conditions, were unable to work a number of days. It was really interesting to be able to see how harsh the environment can actually be when you spend an extended period of time out on a headland just like this. Since the start of the project, we have recorded the site using a number of different methods. So here in the photographs, for example, we can see the laser scan survey that we undertook of Ferriter's Castle. We can see the drone image that we've taken of the headland. We also undertook mapping with the drone and were able to create 3D models of the headland. And also the walkover survey, which we undertook here on the headland. We have also undertaken both magnetometer and resistivity survey, and they helped us to identify target areas for our excavation. Our excavation approach aimed to identify the period's usage of the various sites visible on the headland and to gain a greater understanding of the changing environment and usage of this headland. So ultimately, the eroding archaeological features that are being lost to the sea were the priority areas for excavation. In this image, we can see the excavation of the outer ditch taking place. This was a targeted area for excavation due to how the sea encroaches on the site from both the north and the south here. The ditch would have formed part of the early promontory fort defences, which were then reused and altered in the medieval period and formed part then of the defensive works associated with the castle. The excavation area did clip the outer bank, but it didn't clip the inner bank here at the outer defences. So our main interest was looking at the ditch to find what evidence we could associate it with the initial construction of the promontory fort and then the later reuse of the site associated with the castle. So the ditch itself had a depth of well over a metre, and we did identify charcoal in the basal layers, so we are hoping that we should be able to get a date for the construction of the ditch itself, or an indication of when the ditch may have been constructed. So apart from a number of modern finds, such as coin and lead fragments and clay pipes, the ditch itself produced very few finds, which is quite surprising due to its proximity to the castle. But we did manage to sample all the different contexts in the ditch, and we're hoping to be able to create quite a substantial record of the past environment of the site. So the work focused on the excavation of a hut site. The site was actually chosen due to its safe location for work, in comparison to the numerous other similar sites on the headland, some of which are falling into the sea and others which lie precariously close to the cliff edge. The impressive nature of this hut site quickly became apparent as the structural elements were revealed during excavation. Here we can see the external wall of the hut site. We can see the entranceway just here. And we can also see the internal divisions within the hut site. The internal divisions lay just below the topsoil and subsoil. So the actual structural nature of the hut site became apparent really quickly. And as we dug through the different deposits, animal bone and teeth were encountered, while flint and chert artefacts were also recovered. Occupation layers were extremely rich in charcoal, and again we took large samples from this area in order to be able to gain insights into the period of occupation and the environment at that time. A beautiful flagstone-lined entranceway that runs from the entrance to the centre of the hut site was also discovered in the last days of excavation. This would have been just below these layers here. So the excavation record was created using drones, camera, GNSS survey, recording sheets, archaeological drawings, and paleoenvironmental sampling. One of the main methods used to create site plans was actually structure for motion. Here we can see an example of it from some of the earlier layers of excavation. So this method, what it does is it uses for photographs taken by hand from drones and extendable camera poles in order to be able to cover the entire excavation area. And then we bring these images together and run them through different software programs in order to be able to create 3D models of the site. So what this does is it gives us exact replicas of the excavation as we removed different contexts and revealed different layers of interest. So we then have measured data set, which is highly accurate, and we were then able to complement these 3D models and site plans by using GNSS survey. So the GNSS survey was then used to plot the different contexts that as they became visible within the excavation area. So we then have all contexts recorded separately from our archaeological site plans through GNSS survey, and we were able to collect height and locational data for all the different contexts which we exposed, and all of which again we sampled. So it was really important to us to be able to build a picture of the changing environment of the site, as we needed this in order to be able to understand the usage of the headland from the earliest evidence of human occupation that we had right up to the present day. So other methods we used also included 2D archaeological drawings, and we also recorded the site with a number of other methods, with photographic and videography. So we've really tried to create as extensive a record as possible of the site. So really this excavation scratched the surface of the stories of Ferriter's Promontory Fort and Castle. And as we start to process the excavation results, we will start to find answers to our initial questions about when and why the headland was occupied. Further work on a site such as this will really help us tell the story of past societies and their usage of this headland. Also, their responses and adaptations to harsh and changing climates. So this work holds the ability to provide greater insights at both national and international levels of this really important Irish site type that is the Promontory Fort, and that we are seeing in all the different case study areas we're working on being so negatively and severely impacted by climate change. And what's really important about the Promontory Fort too is it remained an enigma in the Irish archaeological record. And there's a number of reasons for this. This is due to a lack of artifacts, often a lot of Promontory Forts. There might not be so many readily identifiable archaeological features visible in the interior of the fort, and therefore they haven't really necessarily been subject to archaeological investigations previously. So that's the end of my talk, and thanks very much to everyone for listening, and I hope you have enjoyed it.
Sandra, thank you so much. That was great. Just also to, at this point, welcome everyone who's in attendance live. It was, I think, a really interesting and informative lecture, so thank you for that, Sandra. And I think it is particularly good that we had an opportunity in this lecture to see some sites that are maybe less known by all of us, by the public, but even those of us who are involved in archaeology in Ireland. They're not the most well-known sites prior to this particular project. So just to remind you, if anybody would like to ask a question, you're welcome to type it in. In the meantime, I suppose one of the comments I would make is that Sandra's lecture has really shown us the value of high quality data, and that it's so important for us as we try to combat the effects of extreme weather events and climate on the archaeological heritage. And that is, I would think, one of the outstanding values of the project. And actually, just the other evening, an exhibition on the Cherish Project has opened. So I might just ask Sandra to tell us a bit about that before we look at a question or two.
Great, thanks, Nessa. Yeah, so we launched the Cherish exhibition in the Dún Laoghaire Library just this Wednesday gone by. So the exhibition is on display until the 26th of September, and then we moved the exhibition to Rush in North County Dublin, where it'll be on display again for another month. So if anyone has any chance, it's on the third floor of the library, and it's well worth visiting if you're in the area.
Very good. That's certainly the case. I saw it myself the other evening, and there's even part of it outside. So even as you stroll past the DLR lexicon, you can see some of it there. Now, just to go to a question or two, which Sandra has kindly agreed to answer. I'll just read this question. Is there cooperation between the Cherish Project and other agencies to assess the impact of coastal erosion in particular areas?
Yeah, so with the Cherish Project, what we've kind of done from the outset was kind of tie in with local authorities where possible and other groups working in that area. So, you know, whether it's other kind of citizen-based groups like Clean Coasts, or we've also tied in with other EU-funded projects such as Adapt Northern Heritage. So say our work with Adapt Northern Heritage would have been in Ballinscouts in County Kerry, and that was one of the study areas for adapting Northern Heritage, and it's one of our study areas. So we were able to share our data, and although we were both looking at climate change impacts on cultural heritage, we were looking at different aspects of that. So, we've been able to, in a number of instances anyways, kind of share the different data and knowledge we're getting, and also been able to use data and knowledge from other projects. So that has been really helpful.
Yeah, the local aspect of it, I suppose, is particularly important where you're working, in any one of those counties where the project is concentrated. And then, on a more national level, there is the climate change committees and working groups within the department. So the research data that's obtained will feed into the work of the adaptation project or the adaptation plan for climate change in the country as a whole. And the National Monument Service and ourselves in the National Museum, we would also be involved in a lot of those committees. So we benefit from everything that Cherish produces, really. And so let's see, a lot of damage from weathering to the dunes has taken place at North Bull Island. What can be done to limit further damage? Now, I think that's an area that Cherish has been looking at as well. Isn't that right, Sandra?
Yeah, so we've been undertaking repeat survey on Bull Island due to the shifting sands and the exposure of shipwrecks on the foreshore in particular. The dune systems themselves are something that we are looking at as part of the project with our colleagues in Aberystwyth University in the Geography Department. It's one of the type of environments that is of interest to them. But when the Cherish Project, we kind of assess what's happening to these type of environments, rather than identifying and, I suppose, intervening in I suppose, preventing further damage. There's a number of different methods that are used for dune systems to try to retain them as much as possible, but I don't know if that's being implemented at Bull Island or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suppose it would be an area that Dublin City Council, I think, are quite involved there as well. Another thing that struck me listening to and watching your lecture, Sandra, is the health and safety aspect of it. I mean, you mentioned and showed images of some of your colleagues literally hanging over cliffs. So there's just so many different facets to the project, and it was quite fascinating to get a sense of that as well.
Yeah, and it's great to be able to use all these different methods to be able to access heritage in I suppose maybe restricted locations, whether it's underwater or whether it is on a cliff edge. Because there directly we were able to record the archaeological layers without actually undertaking excavation of the site.
Mm-hmm.
Try to garnish as much information of what is already exposed. So it's been really great having those type of skill sets throughout the project. It made a huge difference.
Yeah, it was great to get a kind of a bird's eye view through the drone photography, like when you were undertaking that excavation on the Dingle Peninsula. We were not only looking at a site that would be relatively unfamiliar, and especially as it was a new excavation, but to be able to look right down on the features as they emerged, the different stone features and the ditch, and that I thought that was very informative, very, very good imaging.
It's great to be able to get all the different perspectives, or the type of perspectives you wouldn't naturally get from being underground. So, yeah.
So there's another, what would it be, about a year and a half or so left, is there, in the project?
Yeah, so we have until June 2023.
Right.
So the latter part, we've more or less completed all of our baseline surveys now, and we've undertaken monitoring surveys, and I've been able to see that actually quite a lot of our sites are being impacted. For example, there in the Saltee Islands, we've seen obviously huge changes to Promontory Fort there, but then the latter part of the project focused more on community engagement and community outreach, so that part will commence in June of next year.
Okay, very good. That's great. And I'm sure there's been a learning process. I think it was mentioned by you at the start that there's 4 partners, 2 in Wales and 2 in Ireland. So I'm sure that particular partnership has had a strong learning element to it as well. And I know, for instance, as well, we heard in the lecture that the technology section within the Discovery programme is very heavily involved in the innovative methodologies for scanning and laser scanning and all that sort of thing. So, I'm sure that has been valuable as well, to have that dual partnership between Ireland and Wales.
Yeah, it's fantastic because all the different partners provide different skill sets, different knowledge bases. So, it has been really, it's really given us this opportunity and chance to get as much information about the archaeology and the environment using the different skills that are present. Like in the Royal Commission, we have an aerial photographer, and he has photographed most of the case years along the Irish coastline. So it's just having access to so many different skill sets has been obviously really good.
Yeah. I just see another question here now, and I think it may be a little bit outside our scope, but we'll see what we can do with it. And I'll read it. You said 43 forts around the Waterford area. Would you have any idea about the north coast, Donegal, for instance? So I'm not sure whether we can deal with that very satisfactorily, but I'll let you have a stab at it, Sandra, if you wouldn't mind.
So what I always quote when I say the number of Promontory Forts, that's the ones that are currently recorded in the Sites and Monuments Record. So they have the online database on archaeology.ie.
Exactly,
so
yeah.
Through that database, you can actually, for example, there's 508 coastal promontory forts recorded in Ireland on the database. So you can look at it by county and see how many are in all the different counties as well. So I don't know about Donegal, but you can find it out pretty accessibly, or it's pretty accessible on archaeology.ie if you have particular areas of interest.
Yeah, it's a particularly good site, and you can search for particular townlands. So if the inquirer has an interest in a particular part of Donegal, you can search under individual townlands in the archaeology.ie database. So I think we're getting fairly close to the end of our time. And before we finish, I'm going to hand back to my colleague Siobhan Pearce. But before that, I just want to thank Sandra very much again for a very thought-provoking presentation. And I think it's obviously a really topical and apt topic at the moment. There's been so much reporting between the UN report and all the different media reports, very stark images and reports of events in places like Germany and Greece. And, it's just for Heritage Week, it's really the most topical area that we could be addressing, I suppose, really. So before we depart, I'm just going to hand back briefly to my colleague, Siobhan Pearce, Education Officer.
Thank you, Nessa. Just to say, this was the 4th lecture in a series of talks that we've had over the last few months. We started back in May with Biodiversity Week, so appropriately enough, we finished here in Heritage Week. And those talks are up on the museum YouTube channel, and this one also will be posted up there. I know some of you have found them. There's been hundreds of viewings of the different talks over the months. So it's been great you've come with us, those of you who've tuned in and with us each month over the last few months and attended the talk series. I'd really like to thank Sandra. She's been great today and stuck with us through all kinds of technological adventures as well. And also, of course, giving us a great insight to the really urgent work that you're doing as part of the Cherish Project. I think, you see those cliff collapses and you realise that this is work that needs to be done right now. So thank you very much, Sandra. I'd also like to thank Nessa, who came to us with the idea for the series and worked on developing it with myself in the education department, with Tricia Ryan, who's behind the scenes. She's been working with us on every single lecture as well, as has Grace O'Sullivan, and our IT manager, Gavin, who's had to sweep in as a guardian angel and give us support and advice. And I'd also like to thank our marketing colleagues as well, especially Brian and Maeve, Martin and Francis. I would sort of say the next lecture series is a completely different change of topic. It's all about the column kill, and it will be in the autumn. It also will be run online, and it will be the handbells, books and croziers associated with St. Columba, and that's part of the column kill 1500 celebrations. And you'll see details of those on the museum website. And it's lovely to see all the messages coming in as well. So I'd like to say thank you very much to Nessa and Sandra again. And thank you for everybody who posted questions and comments. And goodbye.